Everyone on our street knows the meaning of the last porch light on Halloween. It belongs to the house where a child never came home. That's what my mother told me when I was 9, voice small and shaking, as she twisted a pumpkin stem off in her hands and didn't even notice the juice running down her wrists like tears. "If the light is still on at midnight," she said, "do not look in that direction, and do not step toward it, no matter what you hear calling your name." That year, I looked anyway. It was the old Miller place at the end of Birch Lane. The one with the cracked stone steps and the maple tree that dropped red leaves like slow rain. People in town said Mrs. Miller had tied a faded ribbon to her mailbox every Halloween for 20 years, waiting for her son to come home in costume. The same way he left the last time anyone saw him. Black cat ears, whiskers drawn on with his mother's eyeliner, pillowcase for candy. He was 8. The story was simple. He went out trick-or-treating. He reached the last porch with the light still on, and he did not return. No noise, no scream, just a porch light that burned a little brighter than it should, in a house that looked a little darker than it used to. My mother made us stop at every house except that one. She kept checking her phone even though no messages were coming in, and her smile was the kind of smile you make to hide a bruise. "We skipped the end," she said. "That house doesn't run out of candy. It runs out of children." That line would become a joke told by older kids. But when she said it, it wasn't a joke. That was the year I started keeping a little notebook of Halloween rules. It was the year I learned that fear, like hunger, is a body feeling that makes you follow orders without thinking. Not look at the last porch light after midnight. Do not take candy from a hand you cannot see. Do not answer when your name is called from a dark place. Simple rules, easy to remember. Years passed. We moved 2 blocks over, closer to the church parking lot where the safe trunk or treat was held, and farther from Birch Lane and its thinning trees and leaning mailboxes. But even then, every Halloween, the story found us. We would hear it at school, hear it at the grocery store, hear it when the local news ran their annual safety segment with the same tired advice about checking candy and staying in a group, as if the danger was inside the wrapper and not inside the night itself. When I turned 17, I told myself I was done being scared of old stories. I told myself the past is just noise until it isn't. That Halloween, I didn't dress up. I didn't go to a party. I didn't go to the safe church lot with its bright music and the smell of warm cider. I went to Birch Lane. I told myself it was a dare, even if no one had dared me. I told myself I was going to record the end of a rumor and put it online with a bored voice and a bored face and prove I was bigger than a porch light. I told myself a lot of things. By the time I reached the Miller place, the street had gone quiet. The air had that cold taste it gets near midnight, like the space between notes in a song. The houses were dark except for the one at the end. The porch light was on. It was the wrong kind of yellow. It didn't spill, it pulled. It made the shape of the porch too clean, the railings too straight, the steps too exact, like a photo that's been sharpened too many times. This is how I know I was still a child then. I thought I could outthink a story. I took out my phone and started recording. I narrated out loud, like those ghost hunting channels that swear every cold spot is a voice and every dust mote is a soul. "This is Birch Lane," I whispered. "This is the Miller house, and that is the last porch light in town." On the mailbox, there was a ribbon. Not faded, new. It was the deep red of a fresh apple skin tied too tight, the knot small and mean. The front door was open a little. "A slice of dark. Hello," I said. It felt like dropping a coin down a well and waiting for the sound to come back. Something moved inside. A shadow that wasn't attached to anything. The porch light hummed. Not the sound a bulb makes, but the sound a throat makes when it knows a song you don't. A voice spoke my name. Not the way my mother said it, soft and slow, like a hug in the throat. Not the way my teachers said it, clipped and practical. This voice dragged its heel on the second syllable, the way I did when I was little and had a loose tooth. I stepped back. My video shook. On the screen, the porch light didn't look like a circle anymore. It looked like a doorway. "Don't," I told myself. Rule 1. Don't answer when your name is called from a dark place. But the voice was not dark. That was the trick. It was warm, like the sound of the kitchen when my mother cooked late and hummed old songs. And I fell asleep on the linoleum with my cheek against the cool floor. "Come on," the voice said. and I could hear laughing behind it. The kind of laughing that kids do when their plastic pumpkin buckets are heavy and their costume masks are crooked and the night still feels like a game. It's the last house. My throat closed. I hadn't heard that sentence out loud in 9 years. My legs moved the way a dream moves. I stepped up onto the first cracked stone. It felt dry and warm like a hand. The second step was colder. The third step was soft, like moss, and my foot sank in a little too much. "Candy?" the voice asked. There was a sound like paper rubbing paper, a pillowcase sliding. I could smell sugar and something else like old rain. I stopped on the top step. The doorway was a slice and I was the knife. "Show your hand," I said, because that was rule 2. Do not take candy from a hand you cannot see. The voice smiled without a face. A small hand extended from the dark, palm up, waiting. It was a child's hand, the knuckles faint and smooth. There were black whiskers drawn on the wrist. Every muscle in my back pulled tight. I wanted to run. I wanted to reach. I wanted to say his name even though I had never known it. "Please," the voice said, and it was not a command. It was not a trap. It was a plea the way storm windows plead when the wind comes hard. I reached out, not all the way, just enough that the air between our hands felt thin. The porch light flickered. The hand twitched, and then, from the street behind me, a sound. Shoes slapping pavement, fast, broken, like someone running on a bad ankle. "Don't!" a woman cried, and the word cracked in half. "Not you too." It was Mrs. Miller. I had only seen her in pictures on town memory pages. Always smiling, always in summer, always holding a boy whose face had the kind of joyful mess that comes from popsicles. Now her face looked like August when it stops trying to be July. She ran up the walk, grabbed my sleeve, and pulled so hard the stitches popped. "Back," she whispered. "Please." Back, the child's hand in the dark curled into a fist. The voice said my name again, but this time it sounded tired, like the end of a school day. Mrs. Miller pulled me down the steps and onto the sidewalk. She stood between me and the porch. The light's hum sharpened, or maybe it was my hearing. "I'm sorry," she told the dark. She said it like a prayer you've said so many times it stops having words. "I can't," the voice didn't answer. The porch light dimmed and then brightened again like someone breathing slow. The door closed the rest of the way with a soft click. We stood there, the three of us. Me, a woman who had not stopped waiting, and a house that had not stopped asking. My phone kept recording. The screen showed us in the wrong colors. The ribbon on the mailbox moved, though there was no wind. "Why does it do that?" I asked, voice small. "Why does it call?" Mrs. Miller didn't look at me. She looked at the porch like it was a photograph of a person she used to know. "Because I asked it to." She said it like a confession you give to water. "The year after," she whispered, "I sat on those steps and said, 'Take my voice if you must, but let it call him home.'" She rubbed her wrist where a ribbon had once worn a mark. I didn't think about how many homes a voice can find. Guilt is a tide. It takes whatever is unmoored. It rocked through me then, not because I had almost stepped over a threshold, but because I understood something terrible and simple. The last porch light is not a trap laid by a monster. It is a prayer that learned how to hunt. We walked back down Birch Lane together. Mrs. Miller kept her eyes on the ground. She told me she had tried to move. She told me she had taken down the ribbon and then put it back up, the way you put back a picture you told yourself you were done looking at. She told me she had changed the bulb, tried blue light, soft light, a porch lamp shaped like a lantern. But every Halloween the glass turned that same wrong yellow at dusk, and the house opened its mouth and the voice went out. "Why did it say my name?" I asked. "How did it know?" "You looked," she said. "It always knows the ones who look." When I got home, my mother was on the porch, pacing with her phone in her hand, the kind of pacing that makes grooves in wood. She saw my torn sleeve and went quiet. I started to say I was sorry, and the sentence broke in two. She didn't ask me where I'd been. She asked, "Did you hear it?" "Yes," I said. She closed her eyes like someone listening for a train. "It knows our names because once, long ago, we said them out loud in the wrong place," she whispered. "We said them with love. That's the hook. That's how it pulls." I didn't sleep. I watched the video in the dark with the sound off. On the screen, when the child's hand appeared, there was a shadow along the knuckles I hadn't seen before. A thin line like a cat's whisker, drawn just a little too long. I paused it and stared. It looked like a hairline crack in porcelain. I scrolled frame by frame. Just before the door closed, in the sliver of space, there was the suggestion of a mirror, or maybe a window, and just beyond it, faces. Too many. Children with pillowcases and masks, their mouths a little too soft, like fruit left in the sun. It wasn't a house. It was a held breath. I deleted the video. It didn't feel like proof. It felt like an invitation. The next morning, I walked back to Birch Lane in daylight with a thermos of black coffee and a note in my pocket. Mrs. Miller was sitting on her steps, hair uncombed, eyes clear. I sat beside her. We didn't talk for a long time. When the sun touched the mailbox, I took out the note and read it to her anyway. It was short. It said, "I forgive you." She took it like it weighed something. "You don't need to," she said. "I know," I said. "That's why it works." We went to the hardware store together that afternoon and bought a new bulb. Not a yellow one, a soft white, the kind that makes kitchens honest. We took down the ribbon. We put up a small sign in the yard that said, "No candy, please don't knock," and beneath it, in smaller letters, "Thank you for remembering with us." That night, the porch light came on. For a second, it looked like it always had. Then it flickered and steadied and turned into the kind of light that doesn't pull, only stands. The door stayed closed. The voice did not call my name. It said something else, so soft I thought at first it was the wind. It said, "Mom." Mrs. Miller's face changed. Not the way faces change when they break. The way they change when you find the thing you lost and realize it's not coming home, but it is, in some way, letting you go. We stood there for a long time. The night went by. Kids walked past in costumes, laughing, their buckets light and then heavy, their masks straight and then crooked. Some looked at the porch light, and that was okay. They didn't step closer. At midnight, the bulb did something it hadn't done in 20 years. It clicked off. Not faded, not hummed, just off. This is where the story should end, and maybe for you it will. But a week later, on a cold morning that looked like the kind of page you start a new chapter on, I found something in our mailbox at home. No stamp, no return address. Just a small envelope with my name written in a child's hand, the letters tall and careful. Inside was a ribbon, not red, white, soft as breath, and a note, 6 words, that felt like a full life. "Thank you for turning the light." I tied the ribbon to our porch rail, only for a day. When night came, I untied it and put it in a drawer with my old notebook of rules. And I added one more, the last one, the one that was there all along but I hadn't known how to say. When the last porch light goes out, do not forget to leave one on somewhere else, for someone who is finally ready to walk away from the door. Because Halloween is a night of masks and monsters, but it is also a night of mothers waiting and children learning how to come home, even if home is not a house anymore. And sometimes the scariest stories are the true ones, where the ghost is just a memory kept too long under the wrong kind of light, humming like a throat that wants to sing and only knows one song. On Birch Lane, there is still a porch, still some old steps, still a maple dropping red leaves like slow rain. But when you walk by now, the night does not pull. It lets you pass. And if you listen very closely, close enough to hear the space between notes, you might think you hear a small, tired voice say a single ordinary word. And you might feel something in your chest untie itself, easy as ribbon. Thanks. Everyone loved our town's Halloween movie marathon. Free tickets, free popcorn, and old scary films playing till sunrise. But the cinema had one rule for night staff that nobody ever laughed about. Cover window 7 before midnight. Do not look through it after the last show. And if you see a face in the glass that looks like yours, clock out and leave without speaking to anyone at all. I was 19 and needed cash for film school, so I took the night shift at Pavilion Cinema on October 31st. The manager, Vic, was one of those guys who decorated too hard. Plastic bones, orange lights, hanging bats even in January. But when he talked about Window 7, his voice got quiet in a way that wasn't for show. He called it the usher's window, a little square pane down the red carpet hallway, where old staff used to check the crowd for trouble back when crowd trouble meant teens kissing behind the curtains and not a phone light spoiling the entire row. 3 things, Vic said, pressing a laminated card into my palm like a blessing and a warning. 1, cover window 7 at 11:59 with the black felt. 2, if the felt is on the floor, don't pick it up. Use the backup and keep walking. 3, If you hear someone say your name in your own voice, punch out and leave. I'll fix the time cards later. It felt like hazing. It felt like a Halloween stunt. It also felt like a rule that wasn't built out of fear, but out of practice. The way kitchens learn where the heat lives and never touch that spot twice. The lobby was a warm carnival. Kids in crooked costumes. Teenagers pretending not to be scared. Parents tired in a kind way. The popcorn machine breathing butter into the air like a spell that makes everything feel okay. I worked the concession till my fingers glowed with salt and the bottoms of my shoes stuck to the floor in a sugary heartbeat rhythm. Every hour I glanced toward the long hallway to Theater 4, where Window 7 waited, a square of glass at shoulder height in the wall, framed in old brass that never kept its shine for long. At 11:50, the last wave of people drifted into theaters. Jackets over arms, whispers like a tide turning. Vic nodded to me and tapped his watch. The black felt was folded in the manager's drawer, heavy and dusty, the kind of cloth that drinks light and refuses to give it back. I carried it down the empty hallway, counting the framed posters going by, the haunting, the changeling, the thing, feeling proud in a way that was too big for a job this small. Window 7 sat between two sconce lights that buzzed like weak bees. The glass was clean, the brass was dull, and in the pane there was nothing but the reflection of a tired kid with popcorn salt on his knuckles and hope in his mouth. I lifted the felt and pressed it into the Velcro strips that someone had nailed around the frame years ago. It stuck with a sound like a soft seal being made. That should have been the end of it. But Halloween is a night that likes to ask one more question, just to see if you answer. Around 12:17, Theater 4 had a soda spill on the back row steps. I grabbed the mop, the bucket, the blue towel that always smelled like the last shift, and headed down the hallway again. Not thinking about Window 7, not thinking about rules, just thinking about not slipping and turning into a cautionary tale told over staff pizza. Halfway there, the hairs on my arms lifted like they'd heard something that I hadn't yet. The sconce to the right gave a little pop and went dim. In that softer light, the felt on Window 7 didn't look straight. It looked like it was breathing. I don't know why I did what I did next. Maybe it was boredom with fear. Maybe it was the part of me that wants to know how tricks work and forgets that some tricks are just teeth with makeup on. I stepped closer and put my fingers on the felt. It was warm, the way a seat is warm after someone stands up. A whisper came through it, small as dust. "Hey!" The voice sounded like mine if it had been softened by water. Rule 3 rang in my head like a dropped tray. If you hear someone say your name in your own voice, clock out and leave. But it hadn't said my name yet. It had only said, "Hey," and my tired brain built 100 harmless explanations in a second. Maybe a kid had slipped through the service door and was messing around. Maybe Vic was testing me. Maybe sound was bouncing from an open auditorium door and making a ghost out of air and angle. "Who is it?" I asked, hating how thin my question sounded. The felt lifted at the bottom, an inch, like a lip. I didn't raise it. I just crouched and looked into the single inch of glass like a kid peeking beneath a curtain. I saw me. Not the me in the brass and sconce reflection, but a me on the other side of the glass. Hallway reversed, sconces reversed, the mop reversed in the opposite hand. He was breathing a little too slow. His eyes were a little too wide. He smiled, and it didn't reach the muscles it should have. "Help me," he said in my voice, but like the words had been pulled through a straw. I messed up. I took it down. The felt fluttered as if a vent had opened. In the reversed hallway behind the other me, there was no sconce light, only a thicker dark that looked like it had weight. The mop in his hand had a darker drip than soda. I pushed up to standing so fast my legs almost failed. The felt fell back into place with a sigh. Rule 2. If the felt is on the floor, don't pick it up. Use the backup and keep walking. My eyes slid to the ground. The felt was not on the floor. It was stuck fine, like it always was. My heartbeat was doing fast math, and it didn't like the answer. I backed away, step by step, until the sconce light felt warm enough to trust. The soda spill could wait. Nothing in that theater was going to go bad if it sat sticky for another hour. Plenty in me could go bad if I fed the wrong window. Vic found me at the concession sink, running water over my hands like I could wash the sound out of my skin. He didn't ask what I'd seen. He asked if the felt was up. I told him yes. He nodded, the kind of nod that says both good and also it's going to ask again. The night stretched. The films breathed. Laughter burst like balloons from auditorium doors and died in the carpet. At 2:03, a little girl cried about a mask that pinched. At 2:17, a teenage boy came out alone and sat under the poster for the Changeling and pretended not to shake. The world was normal in a way that almost made me think I had invented the glass. At 2:43, the usher radio crackled with static shaped like words. At 2:44, every sconce along the hallway blinked once, exactly together, like an eye. At 2:45, the felt slipped. I didn't see it fall. I only heard the sound it made when the Velcro released in a long zipper of breath. By the time I reached the corner, the cloth lay folded on the carpet as neatly as a headless shirt. The backup felt, hung on a hook above the fire extinguisher, was gone. Rules depend on tools. Sometimes the dark knows that. I stood there with empty hands and a head full of instructions and felt as useful as a sign in a storm. On the other side of the glass, my hallway was my hallway. The brass frame was dull. The sconce was lit, and there I was again. Me in my jacket, me with my mop, me with my mouth too wide. He lifted the mop handle and tapped the glass once, twice, 3 times, like knocking on a coffin lid. "Come on," he said in my voice. And this time he said my name after it, softly, like a brother waking you up for a trip you've both waited for. Rule 3 didn't just ring. It screamed. I reached for my time card in my pocket and found only lint. The clock was at the manager's desk. The manager was at Theater 2 fixing a seat. Leaving meant crossing the hallway in front of the window that showed me my own leaving. "I'm stuck," the other me said, and his breath fogged the glass in reverse. And in the fog, I saw words written by a finger from the far side. "Don't cover it." My stomach turned. My mind tried to split itself into enough pieces to hold both truths. One truth was a rule. One truth was a plea in my voice. "Vic," I shouted, not taking my eyes from the pain. No answer. The theater doors breathed trailers and bass. Nobody heard me, or nobody wanted to. There's a thing grief does where it makes you bargain with mirrors. The face you see is yours. The voice you hear is yours. And that means you must be telling the truth, even when what you're telling is what the night wants you to do. I took one step closer, then another. Close enough to touch brass, close enough to see that my other self's pupils were too large for the light he was standing in. Close enough to notice a nick on his left ring finger that I did not have, a tiny crescent like a bite from a small mouth. He lifted his hand to the glass, palm out. I lifted mine, palm out. Warmth met warmth through a cold thing. In the reflection, the real reflection, the one on my side, I caught a flicker of movement behind me. A little boy in a cardboard robot costume, looking up, curious, finger already reaching for the fallen felt. I saw the future in one quick cut. The boy lifting the cloth, the glass clean, the hallway open. My name and my voice saying, "Come here," and the boy trusting because kids trust if the tone is right. I turned away from the pain so fast my neck hurt and scooped the felt from the carpet with my forearms like I was lifting something with teeth. "Hey, buddy," I said to the boy, using the kind of voice adults use when they need to be a shield and a smile at the same time. "Want to help me hang a magic curtain?" He nodded, delighted to be useful, delighted to be part of a trick. Together we pressed the felt into the Velcro. The pain disappeared. The hallway breathed again like a chest finally unclenching. "Rule for tonight," I whispered to him like a secret he could keep. "No peeking games." He saluted with his cardboard hand and clanked away toward Theater 3. Behind the felt, my voice said my name once more, not angry, not pleading, just trying the sound on, like a coat. Then it went quiet in a way that meant it wasn't gone. It was waiting. Vic appeared at the corner, face pale in a way that wasn't stage makeup. He saw the felt, saw my hands, and something like pride and sorry crossed him at the same time. He handed me a metal staple gun from the tool drawer, put his palm on the felt where my other palm pressed from the other side, and said, soft but sure, "We make it harder this year." We stapled the cloth into the wood around the frame, each shot a small loud promise. "Who was the first?" I asked, not because I wanted to know, but because stories want to be told even when they spit splinters. Vic didn't answer for a long breath. "An usher in '98, he said at last. He loved horror more than anyone. Said the window looks into where the scene goes when the cut is too clean. He waved at himself and waved himself in. He looked at my hands like counting fingers. Every Halloween since, it tries to balance the frame. Balance the frame. Put one of me on both sides until the world stops tilting. My stomach did that elevator drop, and my eyes burned with the kind of tears you don't admit to at work. We finished the night on routine autopilot. Refills, cleanups, candy count. A kid's lost mask reunited with a relieved dad. The rule card in my pocket felt heavier than it should. At 5:41, the last credits rolled and the lobby lights rose to a morning that didn't feel as safe as mornings usually do. Vic clocked me out himself and said to go home and sleep. "You did the right thing," he added, reaching for truth like it might bite him. "That's the job, really. People think it's popcorn. It's doors." At home, I tried to dream about anything but glass. When I woke up at noon, there was a voicemail with no number attached. Only a breath and a phrase. "You almost had it right," in a voice that was mine and wasn't. I deleted it without listening twice because twice is an invitation. And I was learning. That evening, I went back to the cinema with a small package under my arm and a favor in my mouth. Vic let me into the hallway and watched while I unrolled another strip of cloth. Not black this time, but deep red velvet I'd found in a thrift store bin. The kind of red that feels like a theater curtain sighing open. We layered it over the black, staples biting through both. Brass frame, invisible undercolor. "What's the red for?" Vic asked, not mocking, just curious. "Because not everything you cover is a cage," I said, surprised to hear the sentence come out of my mouth like I'd had it ready for years. "Sometimes it's a stage you're not ready to step onto yet. If it wants balance, maybe it understands curtains." He stared at me for a second and then laughed like someone who'd been holding his breath for too long. "Kid," he said, shaking his head, "you're either going to be a great director or you're going to get me haunted twice as hard." We left it like that. The hallway felt like a mouth finally closed. The sconces hummed their tired hum. The red drape didn't move. On November 2nd, a boy came back with his dad and handed me a crumpled thank you note drawn in crayon. 2 stick figures, one holding a square of red, both smiling with too many teeth in a way that was somehow right. The dad said, "He told me you taught him a magic trick." And I said, "Only the kind that keeps the world on this side of the glass." Sometimes at night, when the city is quiet, the phone still buzzes with a no-number message that says my name exactly the way I say it to myself when I'm not talking. I don't answer. I put the rule card on my nightstand and the red ribbon I cut from the velvet beside it and tell the dark a truth that feels like a lock clicking shut. The window can look like me all at once, but it cannot be me because I am the one who chooses whether a story opens or closes. And tonight this story is closed. With velvet, with staples, with a boy who learned a good rule on the right night, and with a kid at a sink washing salt from his hands and deciding that some reflections deserve to starve. And if, next Halloween, the felt falls and the curtain lifts and the other hallway calls my name, I will do what the best ushers do, step into the aisle, lift a hand, and gently ask the audience to stay in their seats until the credits finish rolling, because the credits are where the names go. And a name is not a door unless you turn the handle. On Halloween night when I was 12, someone left a small pumpkin on our doorstep, with my name carved into it from the inside, glowing like a secret I hadn't told anyone yet. Mom said to leave it alone and go to bed. I didn't. I sat with Isandonis, that little light, until midnight and made a wish I should never have made. My father had been gone 6 months by then, not dead, not vanished. Just gone in the way people go when they can't carry their sadness home anymore. He loved October. He loved pumpkin patches and bad horror movies, and the way our street smelled like leaves and wood smoke. He used to say that Halloween belongs to people who still believe doors can open from both sides. But you only ever open it once, he'd add with a shy smile, like he was sharing the last piece of candy. The pumpkin was the size of a cat curled in a lap. The way my name glowed from inside made it look warm enough to hold. I touched the stem. It was damp and cold. I put my ear against the shell like it was a seashell, and I could hear October's ocean. Somewhere deep, something ticked. A slow, patient sound like a fingernail on wood. Mom was trying to be brave that year. She kept a bowl of mini chocolate bars by the door and told the neighborhood kids she loved their costumes with her best supermarket smile. But when she saw the pumpkin with my name in light, her mouth changed, shapes like it was searching for a word it had lost. "We didn't order that," she said, as if Halloween delivered. "Can I keep it?" I asked. "No," she said too fast. then softer. Please blow it out and put it outside the gate. If it's a prank, they'll come get it. If it's not ours. I waited until she went upstairs. The house creaked the way old houses do when the heat rests and the night puts its hand on the roof. I closed the blinds, sat cross-legged on the mat, and pulled the pumpkin close. The light inside fluttered like a heartbeat after running. The carved letters of my name were backward from the outside, but from where I sat they were perfect. I made a wish. It felt silly and desperate. I whispered, "Bring Dad home." Then I added, "Because children think bargains make magic fair. Just for tonight. Just for Halloween." The ticking inside the pumpkin paused, then resumed, slower. Through the slit of the carved letters, I thought I saw something else inside, something that moved like smoke and folded like paper being taught to breathe. The porch light buzzed. The street outside made its faraway Halloween sounds, laughter, a carried word, the soft gallop of kids in too big shoes. Then a knock came at the door. Not a trick-or-treat knock. 3 slow taps like someone remembering a rhythm. "Mom," I called. She didn't answer. I heard the bathroom sink upstairs, water stopping, the small domestic silence after. I opened the door. Dad stood there in his old brown coat, the one that always smelled like cold air in gas stations. His hair was too neat. His smile was the shape of the smile in framed pictures, but heavier, as if it knew its own weight. Behind him, the night leaned close like it wanted to hear what he'd say. "Hey, Bug," he said softly. I hadn't heard that nickname in half a year. The word flew across the porch and landed in my chest with its knees pulled up like it expected to be dropped. I didn't jump into his arms. Something in the air told me to move slow, like the room was made of glass. "You came back," I said. "I had to," he answered, eyes flicking to the pumpkin as if it were a clock. "You asked." The pumpkin's light brightened. The carved letters warmed my knees. Mom came down the stairs with a towel in her hands, drying the same place over and over. She saw him and stopped on the second to last step. She didn't scream. She didn't speak his name. Her mouth made a small O, and her eyes went to the pumpkin the way a person looks at a bridge before they test it. "Just tonight," Dad said to her, apologizing with his shoulders. "If that's okay." It should have been the happiest moment of my life. It was, but happiness can sit on top of a deep lake and not know what swims under it. We sat at the kitchen table like we used to. Mom made cocoa. Dad held the mug, letting his hands learn warmth. He asked me about school, and I told him about the kid who dressed as a traffic cone and kept getting yelled at by actual cones. We laughed, but the laugh felt like a recording from last year. Mom asked him if he'd eaten. He said he wasn't hungry. She asked where he was staying. He said, "Around." The way his eyes avoided corners made the room feel rounder than it was. When the doorbell rang again, Dad flinched a little, the way a person flinches when a song they know starts playing from a room they didn't know had a speaker. I went to the door with the candy bowl. A tiny witch stood there, her lipstick carefully crooked. "Trick or treat," she declared. I gave her 2 mini bars for being brave. "Nice pumpkin," she said, pointing past me. "It knows your name." I looked back. The light inside the pumpkin was brighter than before. A thin string of something, ash, web, stretched from the inside rim to the candle like a new thread in an old shirt. For a second I thought I could see a shape in there, like when you stare at a lit window and imagine the room beyond. A silhouette, small shoulders, a bowed head. When I closed the door, Dad was standing, hands in his coat pockets. "We should go for a walk," he said. "The air's good tonight." Mom's mouth pressed into a line. "You can walk the block," she said. "Stay where the porch lights are. Be home by 11. He nodded, like a boy asking to borrow the car he already had keys for. He looked at me with a strange fond worry, as if he was memorizing, and that's when fear brushed the back of my neck, the kind of fear that knows a countdown has begun and refuses to say the number out loud. We walked. Our street wore Halloween like a favorite sweater, loose and happy and a little frayed. Dad listened more than he talked. When he laughed, it was always a beat after me, as if he had to translate the world and send the feelings back through a tunnel. At the corner, we passed an old man on his stoop, staring at a photo on his phone and weeping in small, polite sobs. He kept the light on, Dad murmured. At the house with the inflatable cat, a woman lit a candle in a jar and whispered into it. "She's making change," Dad said. And when I asked what that meant, he shook his head, like a person who could explain a magic trick but wouldn't. At 10:43, we reached the small park where he used to push me on the swings. The swings creaked the way swings do in movies. The sky had that thin, cold look, like it had been ironed. We sat on the bench by the sandbox. He stared at his hands. I stared at him, counting stitches in his coat sleeve to keep from counting minutes. "I didn't leave because I didn't love you," he said finally, voice steady but thin. "I left because I loved you in a way that didn't know where to put itself. It kept breaking furniture." "I would have picked the pieces up," I said, and my throat hurt because all the true words were sharp. He nodded, as if he agreed and as if agreement changed nothing. "Love needs a room that fits it," he said. I kept trying to make mine smaller. He looked at me with a softness that made my eyes sting. "You asked for me. The asking has weight. It made a path. How long can you stay?" I asked. He looked toward home, toward our porch, toward the small living fire that had spelled my name. "Until the light goes out," he said, "or until we blow it out." He almost smiled. "Doors open both ways on this night, but they don't like to stay open. They start pulling, and pulling changes faces." "Does it hurt?" I whispered, and immediately hated the question for being selfish and honest and childlike all at once. "Only when I pretend I'm supposed to be here," he said. "It hurts less when I remember I came to say goodbye, right?" We walked back, holding hands like we were balancing on a rail. The pumpkin's glow was too strong now. The carved letters weren't letters anymore. They were lines of light, ribs around a heart. The ticking inside had become a slow scrape, like something trying to find a door in a round room. Mom stood in the doorway, not crossing the threshold. Her eyes were wet and clear. "We should blow it out together," she said. Dad nodded. We gathered close, our heads almost touching over the little round sun of the pumpkin. My breath shivered. His breath didn't fog the air. "On 3?" I said. We didn't count. We blew. The light went out, but didn't. The shell stayed dimly lit from inside, the way skin can glow with heat after the burner is off. A small thread of ash floated up from the candle and landed on the porch rail in a delicate curve that looked like the letter of a name. Dad closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were a fraction farther away. "Thank you," he said to Mom. "For the door." "Thank you," Mom said to him. "For knocking." I grabbed his coat sleeve. "Come back next year," I blurted. "Because children try to schedule miracles the way you schedule dentist appointments." He shook his head, gentle. "If you leave the light will learn you," he said. "Not all learning is kind." He touched my hair, clumsy with love. "Make a different wish next time, or none. Some doors should be windows, and some windows should be mirrors." The ticking inside the pumpkin stopped. For a second, all 3 of us were there, breathing the same breath. Then the porch light buzzed, and the space between blinks was long enough for him to be gone when it came back on. I didn't cry right away. I stood with my hands on the pumpkin and felt the last heat fade. The shell was heavier, as if it had been asked to hold too much. Inside, something faintly scratched again. I leaned close. I heard 3 sounds. The first was the quiet of a room after someone leaves. The second was the tiniest voice, not his, not mine, whispering one word: home. The third was my own breath, steadying. Mom wrapped her arm around me. We sat on the step with the door open to the October air, letting the house and night talk to each other like neighbors on adjoining porches. Kids came for candy. We gave it out. A boy in a skeleton suit asked if our pumpkin was sleeping. "Yes," Mom said. "And dreaming about pie." He giggled and ran. At midnight, the porch light clicked off by itself. We didn't rush to turn it back on. We sat in the soft, honest dark. In it, faces are just shapes, and love is a feeling that doesn't need features to be recognized. I took the pumpkin down the path and set it outside the gate like Mom had wanted in the first place. I touched the cool, bumpy skin. "Thank you," I said. It sounded silly and perfect. I didn't make a wish. I made a promise. I promised to keep the door closed unless all three of us were ready to open it from both sides. Winter came. The pumpkin settled and sagged and finally fell into itself, orange becoming brown, then soil. In spring, a small vine grew in the dirt by our gate. I pulled weeds around it, gave it water, built a little trellis from sticks and string. By summer, we had a green world at our feet. In October, a single pumpkin swelled, round and patient. We didn't carve it. We lit a candle beside it and let it be a pumpkin, not a letter. On Halloween night a year later, we sat together on the porch, Mom, me, and the lit candle beside the uncarved pumpkin. We didn't wait for a knock. We listened for laughter on the street, for footsteps on leaves, for our own breathing lining up like 3 lines on a page. The candle burned down to a gentle wick. The wind picked up just enough to carry a smell that made us look at each other and smile. Cold air in gas stations. That was enough. That was plenty. If someone leaves a pumpkin on your doorstep with your name inside the light, you will be tempted to wish. If you do, and if something kind comes, hold its hand like you're crossing a narrow bridge together. When it's time to go, let go first. That's not losing. That's choosing. And if no pumpkin comes, light one anyway. Names are only doors when you carve them. Some nights, the best magic is the kind that keeps the house warm and the gate closed, and teaches you how to love a person without asking them to stand in the wrong kind of light. If this story gave you chills and also hit your heart, tap like so more horror fans find it, drop a comment with which moment stuck with you most, and subscribe with the bell on for true feel horror. Share this with a friend who keeps a light on for someone. And if you want more, type light in the comments to unlock a bonus epilogue in the next upload.